Okay, I think we're live on Facebook. We're going to be live any second now on Twitter. We are good. And here we are. Shelley Neese is in the house. Author Shelley Neese. How are you, Shelley?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
It is a real pleasure having you. I'm already going to show everybody right at the outset what they're in for, because this is unbelievable stuff.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. All right, everyone, look at this. This is the book. This is the book, The Copper Scroll Project. First, where do they buy it?
Everywhere that you buy books.
Everywhere you buy it. Great.
Amazon, whatever, Barnes & Noble, bookstores, hopefully.
All right. So now you know where to buy the book.
Everywhere.
Now we're going to talk about why you're going to be buying the book. Mm-hmm. What? Okay, now even I'm familiar with the Temple Mount. Right here, we're in Jerusalem, right? Mm-hmm. I love taking my kids down to the Dead Sea area, for the water, for the hikes, everything. I've actually never been to the Qumran, but I know what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. Mm-hmm. Never heard of the Copper Scrolls. What are the Copper Scrolls, and why did you write a book about the Copper Scroll Project? And then I'm going to follow up. You don't have to answer it all now, but I'm already putting it all out there. What is the connection with secrets about the Temple Mount? Like, whoa, is this a fiction? Is this a novel? What are we looking at here? So go for it, Shelley.
Right. So I always have to start off on just what is the Copper Scroll, because even though, I mean, it'll blow your mind what it actually is, and that you haven't heard of it, but I think just for a long time people didn't know what to do with it, because the Copper Scroll is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's 800 or so Dead Sea Scrolls, much of them fragmentary, so literally thousands of fragments of Dead Sea Scrolls. But the Copper Scroll is written on copper. All the others are on papyrus or leather.
Right.
In fact, it's not only the only metal Dead Sea Scroll, it's the only metal ancient document ever that we have. So it's about 7 feet long. It is written in 12 columns. It's about 1.5 feet wide. So we imagine that it was once hammered up on a wall. It was some sort of plaque in an area. But we know that the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden on the eve of the destruction of, when the Romans destroyed the temple.
Right.
So the idea is that the Copper Scroll dates to the same time period as the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it was all before the destruction of the Second Temple. So the idea is that just like Jews hid their precious scrolls in their ancient library in the caves surrounding Qumran, at some point they also hid the Copper Scroll while they were hiding the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Copper Scroll is pointing to the temple treasury. It's pointing to items from the Second Temple, possibly even the First Temple, but let's say the Second Temple. And so that's what the Copper Scroll is, but for a long time people didn't know what to do with it because it doesn't offer us anything. It's a really boring scroll to just read on its own.
So I just want to hold on that point for a second, because you just
It's an ancient treasure map. It's a 2,000-year-old ancient treasure map.
Did you just hear what she's saying? It's an ancient treasure map.
And it's real. I mean, you can look at the Wikipedia Copper Scroll, and
wait, is it
blank ancient treasure map?
So it's accepted knowledge that this Copper Scroll, and again, do you guys get this? You're talking about a 2,000-year-old scroll written on copper, hence called the Copper Scrolls. So, and again, from reading, I didn't finish the book, but I started the book, and obviously experts say the fact that it's something written on copper instead of the regular papyrus scroll means that it was important.
Super important. To me, what's interesting, too, is that the handwriting is hurried. The handwriting isn't good. There's mistakes in it. There's, instead of using a nun sofit when they should, they use a regular nun. There's spelling mistakes. So the indication is that this wasn't a perfect scribe that was chiseling the Copper Scroll. They were in a hurry. They were in a rush. They rolled it up. Originally, it was one Copper Scroll. It snapped in two when they were rolling it up. So when the archaeologists found it, it was two separate rolls. And so all scholars agree that it's a real, authentic document, because otherwise, why would it exist? It has no literary value. It has no biblical value. It's not telling, the tale of some ancient hero. It's a list. It's an inventory. And so why would they go to so much trouble to write an ancient list with no legendary value, no literary value? It has to be real. So scholars really don't debate on whether or not it's an authentic document. The real debate comes in what exactly is it pointing to? Where did the treasure come from, and where is it now?
Wait, what? And can you give us a hint? What has been deciphered to be written in it that makes some experts think that it's this treasure map to the temple articles that you write about?
So it's over 60 locations written in 12 columns. So it's a verbal treasure map. It's not like a pirate treasure map. And whenever it describes things, it will do it very dryly, but it always it'll point you to a place that'll say in Machia's courtyard or under the cistern or at the steps pointing eastward 40 cubits. So it'll give you very specific directions. And then next of each of the over 60 places, it'll tell you how deep to dig, the depth that you need to dig. And then it'll tell you what you'll find. Now, the tricky part is the finding part, because it'll always mention talents of gold and silver or vessels. It doesn't use temple furniture language. It's not saying Ark of the Covenant or altar of incense, but it uses holy language a lot. So a lot of times it'll say sacred tithes, one time it does say my priestly vestments, and it uses the personal yud behind priestly vestments, indicating that the person who might have inscribed it was a priest.
Wow.
Yes. So there are some very specific temple-related items, but otherwise it's more of an adjective thing that it'll use sacred, holy, or sanctified tithes a lot of times. So really, though, why we know it must, or why a lot of scholars think it's connected to the temple, is because there's no other place it could have been connected to, because it's copious amounts of gold and silver. If talent in the copper scroll, which is about 75 pounds, means, or that's how we estimate it to be today, then it's 160 tons of gold, silver, and bronze of what the copper scroll is pointing towards. The only place that would have had that kind of wealth is the temple.
Wow. And so now I want to go into you. From what I understood, you've spent 10 years writing this book, like researching, working on it, right? And again, from the little I read, there's a big, not mystery tale, but a bit of adventure in following up, in getting the information about these copper scrolls and checking out if it really is a treasure map, this literary treasure map. Why? Why did you spend 10 years of your life on this project to write this book that you all have to buy?
Thank you. That's very sweet. So I didn't intend to, I didn't have an ambition to write any book, but sometimes stories find you, and this story found me. So originally I just wrote an article. I met Jim Barfield. He's the explorer who believes that he solved the copper scroll. So I met him at a conference.
That he what? That he solved. Meaning that he figured out that it is a treasure map.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Or that he's figured out where the locations are.
Oh, he figured out where okay.
Yes. And so he's really been on this journey for about 10 years. And so when I first met him, I thought the world needs to know about the copper scroll. This is a cool story. He's a retired arson investigator in Oklahoma.
Makes perfect sense.
He applied certain skills to the copper scroll, came up with a solution, and had a meeting with the Israel Antiquity Authority, and had an excavation within the year. So just that very first story that happened out in 2009, I wrote about it for Jerusalem Post. It became a little bit of a longer story, and I wrote about it for Jerusalem Post Metro Edition, which allows you to go 3,000 words. And then at a certain point, I realized, as the years went on and as the story grew and the human element grew, I thought, this story is so good. A monkey could write this story, and I'm not going to let someone else be that monkey. I'm going to write this story. Because I could tell, all of the bits and the pieces were growing, and we were getting closer to actually resolving this issue. But also, Jim Barfield is not Jewish. He's Gentile. And then other Jewish leaders were getting involved because they heard about what he was doing and what he was holding up. And so it was the human piece that became so interesting to me, too. Because I think in the beginning, nobody really wants to write about archaeology, a book, over a 10-year period. Because what if you don't find anything? I mean, it's a kind of a career killer if you write about, if you bring people along this 100,000-word journey and you're not going to find anything in the end. But at a certain point, I realized, no, this story is good by itself, even if we don't find anything. Now, spoiler alert.
Okay.
There is a cliffhanger. We do have a positive scan.
Okay.
And so that's all part of the book, and we can get to that later if you want. But anyway, so that was the motivating driving factor. I wanted to be the monkey that wrote a story so good.
Now, you mentioned Jim is not Jewish, but the other Jews got involved. But what's your story? Are you Jewish?
So I'm Christian. I work for a Christian Zionist organization in D.C. I moved to Israel in 2000, and so when we came, that was right before Camp David was happening. Negotiations were happening.
Correct.
Barack was it. So it was a different feel, a different time. My mother was okay with me coming. It seemed like peace was upon us. And then so that was, I believe, August of 2000. And so the second Intifada breaks out. I had been a math and science major before we moved here. And all of a sudden, I didn't move here because I was particularly interested in Israel. We moved here, my husband and I had just got married, and it felt like a fun adventure. But I had to know what was happening around me. I had to know why bombs were going off, why, Jewish history, I didn't really understand. Ottoman history, certainly not Jewish history, and all of the things about the land. So I just only took those classes, took the classes that could answer my questions, and kind of accidentally, by the end, graduated in Middle Eastern Studies.
Accidentally?
Yeah. Just by following your passions and wanting answers to the questions. Right. But of course, in that process, living in Israel during that time, seeing my Jewish friends suffer in this way, being at a Passover Seder dinner, and then all of a sudden
hearing the news,
having to turn on the television and break that sacred moment to hear the news about what happened. I mean,
Let me know. Shelley is referring to one of the worst terror attacks that took place during that second Intifada. I was here in the country at the time, 2002, Passover 2002, and a suicide bomber went into a dining room where families were sitting and eating at in the hotel dining room.
Lots
and
of
blew
elderly
up
people.
Elderly, whole families, whole chunks of families killed on the spot in what was supposed to be a holiday celebration, and it was a national tragedy, which was the tipping point that finally convinced Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to go into a military operation to end the terror coming out of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank at the time.
Right.
So wow. So you experienced that.
So when I left Israel, I went and worked for a Christian Zionist organization doing advocacy. I mean, I wanted people to be educated on what I saw, and really thinking that a lot of Christians have an instinct to be pro-Israel. They connect to Israel because of the Bible, but they're not educated and they're not activated for Israel.
Right.
So wanting to play a part in that process.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for wanting to take part in that process and still doing that. And thank you for the book. But that still doesn't answer the question, why was this book important for you to write?
Right. Well, so, I mean, archaeology, I feel like, has informed my own faith. And so part of the urge was just to study. I mean, I guess a lot of these questions comes back to my urge to study. But to be able to study first century Jerusalem was important to me. I mean, as a Christian, to be able to understand the world that Jesus was inhabiting, but also for rabbinic Judaism and us Judaism now, is just such an important time and piece of our history. So part of that is to go to the Dead Sea Scrolls and study the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the Copper Scroll in its own unique way shines light on that, because you have to go into an imaginative place of what were the conditions that the Jewish people or priests felt so desperate to enact this covert operation
to hide and then write a treasure map for.
Right, to put all of their sacred text inside caves. And so it created a more imaginative place for me to go to through archaeology and through the Dead Sea Scroll text and the Copper Scroll particularly, to understand my own roots of my faith, and also to understand Judaism better, and just this really, really critical time that has ended up affecting us for 2,000 years. Right. So mostly I want the book to be a teaching tool. It was a teaching tool for me in writing it. It's a book about archaeology, but it's written by a layperson for lay people. I assume
it's not boring. It's not a boring archaeology book at all. All right, so for sure, no, it's very, just from the first chapter, it's very riveting. It brings you in. It brings the story the process that you were going through. Right, she went through this process. You're not just writing about an outside process. You were going through this. Right. So yeah, definitely an exciting book to read. Can you share one of the interesting stories that came out that you write about in the book? Choose anyone, whatever you want.
Okay, sure. Well, so there was a lot of stops and starts. As you probably already know, archaeology is an incredibly political process here in Israel, and also bureaucratic.
Yes.
So there was bureaucratic quicksand, there was political pit stops, and so much was, moving 2 steps forward and 5 steps backwards.
Right, I hear you.
So we did reach an impasse at one point that all we wanted to do, we had dug in 2009 and realized that we really needed more technology that the Copper Scroll says to dig so deep and at such deep levels, especially with another 2,000 years of sand on that has come in. So
2,000 years of sand. It's just to think about that.
So we, on average, we're probably going to have to dig 12 feet just to probe for certain locations in the Copper Scroll.
Right.
And by the way, this is at Qumran that we're talking about. Jim Barfield's research points to Qumran as being the place, which is very logical. And he's not the first one to say that Qumran's connected to the Copper Scroll. He's the first one to say that all 60 locations are at Qumran.
Uh-huh.
And so, and the first to really pursue it, to pursue the Copper Scroll, to seeing it being tested through the end. And so it became very clear in 2009 that it would make, the Qumran's a sacred site as it is, and you don't want to make pockmarks all throughout it and probes that are 12 feet deep. Plus, archaeologists are uncomfortable with it. That's not archaeology, that's treasure hunting. Archaeology, you dig to the last level of habitation. Treasure hunting, you dig 12 feet deep to follow a treasure map that told you to.
For those not familiar, when you're an archaeologist or an archaeological dig, you're basically digging with a toothbrush.
Yes.
Okay, one milliliter at a time. To dig 12 feet down, that is a big no-no in archaeological terms. Right.
Everything. And so they would really risk their own reputation. And so it got to that point, and so we really needed a high-power metal detector, which the Israel Antiquities Authority didn't have access to, or at least wasn't forthcoming about it. Right. And so that began this process of finding the right metal detector, which really took years to find and to wait out the technology and also find the right metal detector. Wow. Because not only we need to tell if we're looking at ferrous or non-ferrous metals, because we know that the Copper Scroll is pointing to gold, silver, or bronze. We're not caring about rebar at Qumran or we don't want false positives. And we also needed to tell the difference if it's a large or a small object. We did try and scan once with the tiny Israeli Antiquities Authority detector, and it was picking up the steel toe of the archaeologist's boots. We're looking for giant amounts of treasure. This isn't going to work. So we had a cube-shaped metal detector, and it could differentiate for all of those things. So basically, we wanted it to tell us: is it large? Is it gold, silver, or bronze? And is it deep? Because if so, that would connect it to the Copper Scroll. Right. And so we tried to get a permit from the Israel Antiquities Authority or from the Judea and Samaria Antiquities Authority. And we tried to get a permit to make this happen. And they were very resistant towards it for reasons that they wouldn't really explain. And so this is just a spoiler alert. I mean, I'm just gonna
go for it. Okay. If she doesn't mind, how am I gonna be? How am I gonna be against it?
So this is totally gonna. This is where the book starts and ends, but it's too exciting not to share with you. So I'm sure you're familiar with member of Knesset Moshe Feiglin, or former member of Knesset.
Yes, he was just here in this seat a few days ago.
No way.
Yes.
Did you talk to him about this?
No, it was before I met you.
Oh, I
met you the next day.
Okay, you got to have him back. But so, is there any? He's a very gutsy guy. Very gutsy guy. So we were at a total impasse. The Israel Antiquities Authority had said no to this permit. We have a $10,000 metal detector that we are dying to use on Qumran, and we do not have permission to use it at Qumran. Right. And so we shared this story with Moshe Feiglin. He was in New York at the time. This was when he was a member of Knesset. And so his political party has a meeting in New York. I believe it was annually. And so I thought it would be helpful to meet with him, and I encouraged Jim Barfield to meet with him. And so that was the only part that I was pulling the puppet strings a little bit. If I just thought, here are two people that I think could connect and talk about this. I meant for Moshe Feiglin to help us get in contact with the education minister, or to pull
to get permission.
Strings. Just help us share the word.
She didn't know Moshe yet. That's why. Yeah.
And once he found out that we happened to be, or Jim Barfield was coming to Israel the next month, I was watching the gears going, and he said, "Do you have the metal detector in Israel?" And we said yes, not knowing what he was about to offer. And he said, "I have Knesset immunity. Bring the metal detector. I'll meet you at Qumran."
Unbelievable.
And that's exactly what he did. We went, Jim Barfield, Moshe Feiglin went to Qumran in tourist hours. Right. He paid for his ticket
to go in.
He walked in with a metal detector and a bag. And he scanned 6 of the 60 sites. We just wanted to scan
according to the information in the Copper Scrolls, deciphered from the unbelievable.
Yes, and so for the record, Jim Barfield wasn't pressing the buttons. Moshe Feiglin, with his Knesset immunity, was doing the scan. And it's not the type of metal detector that will give you an immediate response. You have to go and download it on a computer, and there's a special software to be able to read it. So they didn't know in that moment if they were getting a positive read. It wasn't like an immediate gratification that way. So Moshe Feiglin drives back to Jerusalem, says, "Call me when you know the results." Jem Barfield goes down to En Gedi, downloads the information in his laptop. And what he sees when he opens up in the computer, there was 6 sites scanned. For 5 of the 6, there was a positive read. For 1 of the 6, it was like a read of Fort Knox.
Meaning, like, off the charts?
Yes.
Wow.
And a place that should not have any human activity at all, much less gold, silver, and bronze. So that's where we stand now, and we've kept that secret for a couple of years. That happened a couple of years ago, and we got ourselves in a situation, though, because he was no longer a member of Knesset. We didn't want to get Moshe Feiglin in trouble. We didn't want to get an archaeologist in trouble who we have relationships with, because they weren't involved, and we didn't want to implicate them or hurt their licensing at all. And so it was a problem, because we had information
you couldn't go public with it.
That we couldn't go public with, and that stood to hurt all of us. I mean, I still don't know how it'll affect all of us, but my idea was that the book would just
put it out there for everybody.
Put it out there. Not leak it, because that would be dangerous for us, but just blanket message across Israel to build a grassroots movement of let's test it. There's no harm in testing. I'm not even talking about the sites within Qumran. There's one right outside of Qumran. Let's do that one.
Right.
And we can go from there, but let's do that one.
So you're saying, so basically you're saying, hopefully, with the publication of this book and this information being public, not leaked, not whatever, but public, so everyone knows, that hopefully it will bring about the understanding and or public pressure, so to speak, to then allow for the actual digs to go forward to dig this stuff out and continue and check the other sites as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm sure Israel Antiquities, you're all watching this video right now. Contact Shelley. Let's make this happen.
We'll send you the scans.
That's quite a story. Unbelievable. Right. And again, as someone, I like to call myself like an old new Jew. I think you heard me yesterday speaking to the group in a day and age where Jews should be proud of our identity, should be proud of our culture, should be proud of our return, our miraculous return to our homeland. And therefore, the Temple Mount is something that has very big significance to me and to what I believe is a cornerstone of our Jewish identity. Not to be embarrassed by it, not to ignore it, but to accept it and to own it. And what excites me is an ancient secret fuels the battle for the Temple Mount. It's like, wow, that definitely touches a chord with me, and touches a chord to hopefully hopefully with your book, maybe other Jews can be that spark within them can be kindled to maybe help grow their connection with our holiest site, which has been lost. That connection has been lost. For good or for bad, most Jews today think the Western Wall is holy and that's our holiest place. But no, that's just a retaining wall of the Temple Mount. It's the mount. It's the temple that was on top. That's the holy site for us. The Western Wall is just the closest we could get, that we were allowed to get to for centuries. So thank you so much for spending your time on this book, for writing this book. Any final insight, comment, thought you can share with us?
I just want to make it clear that our motivations for being involved, for Jem Barfield, for my own, this is for Israel. This is to remind Israel of who she is. The way we see it, these copper scroll treasures, this is Israel's dowry. And if we can play a part in returning it, we want to. But there's no ulterior motives here other than that, and just seeing these things be returned to Israel.
Well, since the whole Jewish people basically put me in this place to interview you, I'll say thank you on behalf of all of us.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A pleasure meeting you. May God continue to bless you in all your endeavors, whether for Israel, for the Jewish people, with your advocacy, or in anything you're involved in life. And it was a pleasure meeting you, Shelley.
You too.
All right, everyone. Shalom from Jerusalem. If you haven't bought the book yet while you are watching, Here it is. Go to Amazon or any website where you can buy, or any store. The Copper Scroll Project by Shelley Neese. Shalom from the ancient ancestral capital of the Jewish people, the modern city of Jerusalem. Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching.